Welcome to Meeting the Inconceivable, a podcast exploring Zen koans, dreams, and the creative life produced by Pacific Zen Institute. Pacific Zen has a legacy of preserving and reimagining the koan tradition to meet our own times. With a lively community of artists, innovators, and seekers of all kinds that extends worldwide, our mission is to create a culture of transformation through meditation, koans, the arts, and conversations about the deepest matters. In this episode, Roshi John Tarrant takes up an old koan from the Blue Cliff Record, in which a student asks Yunmen, "Where do all the Buddhas come from?" And Yunmen helpfully replies, "The East Mountain walks on the water," inviting listeners to feel how when we stop reaching, the whole universe pours through. Tarrant tells stories from the Zen Haiku tradition and our capacity to notice the vastness underlying each and everything that appears. Access to the eternal beginning is always near, he says. Where Buddhas come from, where stars come from, where we come from. Practice just means turning toward it.
So, at the beginning of meditation, I don't know, is it any different from the end? The beginning of meditation, just like, yes, in a way, just, I don't know, feel the time, feel the moment in your life, And, yeah, it's a good thing. And here is the thing that's always older than us, older than the time we're in, older than the triumph or the crisis we're in. Here. So that's where, if anybody asks you where you've been, here is the answer. So, yeah. So at the moment, just begin, just feeling the time. The koan I gave us today was, the East Mountain walks on the water. It's a direct step into the inconceivable. So the East Mountain walks on the water. But I've been away I was away for January, and then the first beginning of February, we're all in an intensive retreat, a sesshin, touch the heart-mind. And so I haven't been in the temple here with you for a while, so it's nice to be here. This is Mario de Cunha. You should be able to see mountains on the water. But he did a painting. Mario does these amazing paintings on tiny little bits of paper, sometimes even Post-its, and sticks them together. And he didn't know I was doing a koan about mountains walking on the water, but he decided to do a painting of that, which is kind of how it works. And I don't know, I thought you should enjoy that. He's got an amazing sense of color and beauty. So here we are back again. Where do the Buddhas come from was the question. The East Mountain walks on the water is a typically helpful chant response. And the thing I like about it is how inconceivable it is, And I'll talk about it more later, but for the moment, let's just sit together just for a minute. So you'll feel like if you start reaching for something, it comes over you, and it's like it supports you and it's around you. The East Mountain walks on the water. I'm very interested I'm going to talk a bit about haiku today because, actually what I really want to talk about is that the whole of the universe is in the glimpses. And haiku are like sample glimpses, really. And, that anywhere you enter the whole universe is there. Your hand, for example. And I've been noticing some things about, like taking a month off was, I don't know if it was really off, but where I wasn't teaching, and I just let I let the world just come up around me and saturate me in the circumstance, let myself fall into the time we're in, really, and not try to describe it or make sense of things. And it was kind of nice in that I could see, one of the things I could see rather beautifully is that there's a layer underneath everything that's kind of squidgy, you know, and you know, you have your coffee and you worry about whatever you worry about, money or taxes or the fall of democracy or COVID or climate change or, well, you know, that's probably sufficient right now. And in a way, they're the middle, like there's what having coffee and stuff is the middle layer. Roz Chast has a very funny cartoon about this in the New Yorker that it wouldn't screen share well, I think, so I'm not going to try it. But where she says, I don't know, there's something funny underneath everything, you know. And I noticed that too. I noticed that when I've been driving around recently, then I don't turn on the radio and I don't listen to the shows I used to listen to and things like that, because I don't know, they seem to sort of everything, they don't take into account the squidginess, even if they're talking about it. And so underneath it all, there's a kind of vastness, you know. So the squidginess, the thing that terrifies people, nobody wants to look at, is actually on our side. And so that's the message. That if we turn towards that sense of spaciousness and vastness, you won't find a bottom because there isn't one, but you stop having to fight it off and you stop having to have a self that's off. I'm John, my life can't be squidgy or uncertain. Well, actually it is. And one of the fortunate things about my life is it's squidgy and uncertain. That bottom, underneath everything, there's the vastness. Sometimes the old teachers use the character sky to show that. What's underneath everything, sky. Yeah. Something about the East Mountain walking on the water. So my partner and I were walking. We took a walk out in the Point Reyes area, Limantour Beach, on the Pacific Plate. It's off the North American Plate. And I think it's supposed to be one of the old Miwok trails, but it's just a sort of sandy trail along the dunes above the ocean. And it's one of the wonderful things I noticed that, you know, there are birds and there are the ceanothus, which is the California bush lilac, is out and it's got an incredible honeyed scent. You know, it reminds me as a dove, actually, of the honeyed, just voluptuous scent, and the hummingbirds around, you know, doing their thing with the flowers. And I noticed that after, like, nobody was really walking. You know, there's just the path is going back. And there's a tremendous delight and freedom when I'm not trying to be someone who's walking, and you can tell that this is why we don't teach meditation, because if I'm trying to be mindful while I'm walking, I'm sort of putting, I don't know, something like a self over everything, you know. I'm putting, for some reason, I want to say peanut butter for everything. It's like, and it's not actually delicious. Everything is delicious just as it is, you know. And that's a kind of wonderful thing. And then going down to the beach and sitting down on the beach and on an old log and watching the ducks rise and fall on the inshore, a very soft inshore break, and feeling that the truth of Li Bai is, you know, we sit together, the mountain and me, till only the mountain remains, you know. I'm only the ducks going up and down, up and down. And it's nice to know that sort of magic, that access to the eternal beginning is always there for us. So just to say, in case you wanted to be informed of that, I think that's an important thing. That's important to me. And so first, I think I'll go in by just talking a bit about the East Mountain walks on the water. And there was a teacher who became famous in Zen, who was a 12th century teacher, but his methods and his way is still taught in any temple, pretty much. Any koan temple now, you're running up against his stuff. And he's called Da Wei. And he was a very intelligent sort of person, and really bright and smart and quick to grasp things. But his intelligence, in a way, held him outside of things. And so one day his teacher said, "Why are your nostrils boundless today?" and he said, "Because I'm at your place." And the teacher said, "Oh, you're full of it." And another time, and he was about in his late 20s or something, and his teacher said, "You can talk about Chan or Zen very well. You can quote the sayings of the great masters and write commentaries on them. You're eloquent in giving teachings and quick with exchanges during interviews. But there's one thing you still don't know." And he said, "What's that?" And he said, "Awakening. There's something you have not awoken. There's something in your heart that's holding yourself off. So you're still living in my image is those old-fashioned telephone booths, that you used to have in Australia and in America, where in Australia they were red, I think, if I remember. But, people used to try to see if there was any change in that left over from the last call or something like that. But they had chewing gum, and they kind of always smelled like somebody had been doing something you didn't want to witness inside them. and they were sort of confined in cigarette smoke. But they were a kind of life to be in it. People were in there talking to their boyfriends or girlfriends or whatever, doing deals. But it feels like that when we're trying to cut that self around with us. It feels like living in a telephone booth. It's a lot, kind of alive, but it's cramped, And when it's like walking along above the beach, the old Miwok Trail, the old first person's trail was, there's no boundary, there are no walls in the mind. And that's a nice thing to have. And so Da Wei said, when he said, the guy said, "What if you don't, when I talk with you in your room, in my room, like you see, you've got it, As soon as you leave the room, you lose it. When you're awake and attentive, you have it. But as soon as you fall asleep, you lose it." And how can you ever meet death if you go on like this? And he said, "That's exactly my point of doubt." So anyway, he came to the great Yuan Wu, who compiled the Blue Cliff Record, and he vowed to. He'd tell what a control freak he was. "I'll work with him for 9 years, and if I fail to get in line, if he turns out to be a fraud, or if he acknowledges me when I don't feel I deserve it, then I'll leave him." And so he's really he's really frightened. You can tell he's just really frightened, even though he's done years of meditation. And Yuan Wu gave him the saying, where do all the Buddhas come from? The East Mountain walks on the water. So that was the saying, just let it be with you until the saying walks along the old trail above the Fon dunes, till the saying walks outside and sees. We have summer here in California in February, and looks outside, and we have the spring blossoms, but the summer temperatures. It's kind of eerie, but beautiful and eerie, And so, yeah, but the saying itself, the koan walks along. This mountain walks on the water. And he gave he had 49 interviews with his teacher. He threw himself into the koan. And Yuan Wu rejected all the responses. He said, "You can tell that Da Wei was kind of a hard case, and it was good to just let him take it slow, don't give any hints and things." And then he broke through, and what happened was he overheard his teacher talking to someone who asked about that koan, and Yuan Wu said, "I would have given a different answer. Where do all the Buddhas come from?" I would have said, "The fragrant breeze comes from the south, and a slight coolness stirs in the pavilion." Same as like walking along walking along the old trail by the sea, watching the ducks rise and fall. And when I heard this, suddenly there was no more before or after. Time stopped. I ceased to feel any disturbance in my mind and remained in a state of utter calm. But Yuan Wu didn't even approve of this. He said, I don't know, let's keep it. You're a good horse. Let's keep you running a bit more. And he says, it's indeed not easy to arise at this, but you've died and not yet come to life. Blossoms. But you don't doubt words enough. When you let go of your hold on the precipice, you become the master of your own fate. So that thing about falling into that squidginess, that lack of ground underneath it. And then he gave him an old koan, which the teacher came to another teacher. The teacher in question was Guishan, the great Guishan. I've heard you say being and non-being, it's just like wisteria leaning against a tree. If suddenly the tree falls down and the wisteria withers, where will being and non-being go? So he gave him that koan. And there's a kind of funny, interesting story about long effort and confusion about this koan too, because the student said, a student asked him the question, Grishan just laughed and laughed, and the student said, I made a difficult journey of 1,500 miles to come here. I even sold my clothes to get here, because you had to walk in 1,500 miles speed. There wasn't a tube. There wasn't even a Greyhound bus, And Grishan called his attendant and said, bring some money and give it to this reverend student for his travel expenses, And he said, someday a one-eyed dragon will help you open your eyes. And then the student went off and told the story to another teacher who said, we can say that Grishan is right, head and tail, but did not meet someone who could appreciate him. So the student then asked this wonderful thing. He asked the same question. If the tree falls down and the wisteria withers, if everything we're holding on to falls down, what then? Where will the phrases go? And the new teacher said, that would make Guishan laugh again. And when he heard this, the student finally, his heart opened and something happened for him. He said, from the beginning, there was a knife in Guishan's words, knife that cuts things off. So there's a kind of long history of this, this koan about the East Mountain walks on the water. I think the thing to say about, the sequence there is that, it's all right to discover what we discover and just keep walking. Basho said this great thing, each day is a journey and the journey itself is home. A lifetime. Say even the sun and moon are travelers. This is kind of a version of Sam Hamill's translation. But sun and moon are travelers in eternity. Even the years wander on. A lifetime adrift in a boat or leading a tired horse into the years. Each day is a journey, and the journey itself is home. So, and Dawi finally came home, we might say, finally achieved, he finally, somehow, what his last piece of doubt, I've got it when I'm really working hard and meditating, but I don't when I'm not, that kind of thing, with that wisteria koan. So, I suppose I want to go on and talk about haiku, but I think what we'll do is we'll meditate more first. Well, I'll give you a tiny bit of haiku. I've been reading books on modern haiku. Haiku, is such a marvelous, perfect form. It's a little window into the vastness, into the under what we're standing on, that isn't anything. Old pond, frog jumps in, plop, and that plop, inside that plop, there's the world, right? You've heard that. You hear an owl call. There's the world inside, right? And good to know that the owl will save us. And or even a motorcycle roaring by, with a badly muffled exhaust, everything's inside it. So haiku had that, and then there was a movement in haiku. Gradually, haiku was such a perfect form and had such eternity in it that eventually that sort of wore out, and people became, these perfect imitators of it. And one modern haiku poet said he was the son of a really poor, hard-working tenant farmer, and I think kind of Mississippi, and but it's in Japan, and he found out that his landlord, who never helped them at all, was a famous classical haiku poet, and he loved haiku, but he said, "I'm not going to be that." So there was this sort of overthrow of the old haiku system, and writing different kinds of haiku, and maybe I'll find on here, and one of the was this, and so people started like breaking it open and freeing it up, and it became this lovely way to immerse yourself. And one of the original things to say is that Basho said, according to one of his disciples, Basho said, haikai, the gathering of haikai is for freedom. And one of the interesting things is that people would have a pen name when they wrote. They'd gather together to write haiku, but they wouldn't use their actual names. They'd use a kind of haiku name. And in the old days, in Basho's days, if you used your actual name, it might indicate you were a poor peasant farmer because you only had one name, and or it might indicate you were a feudal lord, and so everything would get incredibly uptight. But if everybody had a different name, somebody was Apple Blossom and somebody was, Mr. Fox, or somebody was Mr. Crane. And I've noticed that heads of practice start doing that in Sesshin, where they start naturally using these names that just belong to Zen, And he said, and for example, the great poet Shiki, Masaoka Shiki, he used more than 1,000 different pen names for different haiku gatherings. So every time he came, he'd come as a different person. And so the poet who said this, he said, I think names are overrated. They keep you imprisoned in some way. and it was a very touching thing. He wanted to show, instead of talking about grief, if one of his haiku was, in the spring wind, mother dead, herbal medicine scatters. So the wind just carries the herbs away because nobody needs it anymore, And he's also the guy who fell in love with hippos. And there's something else I'm thinking about hippos recently, but cherry blossoms fall, you too must become a hippo. And in the spring, lying down desperate as a hippo, it's kind of nice because spring has such a mixed feeling, like it's so full of life and so full of, oh God, things I haven't done, or memories and all that sort of thing as well. And so desperate as a hippo. And on the using your names and how those names free you from the idea that you're a self. He said he has his own haiku name, was Nenten is his haiku name. And he said, when I absorb my Nenten self into hippos, I perceive and feel as a hippo, and I'm a totally different personality from my usual self. When I do this, I become a man who is a hippo. That's it. And I thought of those, that mountain, we sit together, the mountain and me, till only the mountain remains. I thought of myself watching the ducks rise and fall on the inshore break. Ducks rise and fall in their happiness. I am a duck. Like that would become what we see. And so the other thing Shiki did was he would light a stick of incense, he and his friends, and they would just write as many haiku as they could while the incense burned down. And he said, obviously, this is ridiculous in a way, but another way you get in these deep levels of the unconscious. And so surprising, that's presumably where the hippos came from. But that's where the deep, surprising material came out. So that's what I wanted to share there. And blossoms open. This is my own. This isn't wild like his, but blossoms open the sky that all winter was inside the tree. So let's sit together a little, and we'll sit with whatever. I think it's kind of nice to have the East Mountain walks on the water. Where do the Buddhas come from? Where does the Buddha in me come from? Where do I come from? The East Mountain walks on the water. And so, the thing with a koan is really like a thing with your life. Don't try to describe it. Just like be with it, I have a friend who's got a young teenage son who's kind of, and my friend was kind of like is a really high, is a very high-ranking military person, and really high-ranking, and his son is an 18-year-old teenager, and he says, "Will you do this for me today?" And his son says, "Sure," and he can. "Did you do that?" "No." And he says, "He doesn't respect me. He doesn't respect me." And I don't know. It seems like putting too much thinking on the thing, doesn't it? He doesn't respect me. It's just like the East. It's inconceivable. The East Mountain walks on the water. My son didn't make the phone call he said he'd make. What was he doing? He was off playing baseball and talking to girls. Which would you rather? The East Mountain walks on the water. So we step into the indescribable, and with the indescribable, there's not really a flaw in the universe or a problem in the universe. And nobody needs to, in a way, nobody needs to be unhappy or feel that they're achieving something. And deeper and before that, the East Mountain walks on the water. The East Mountain walks on the water. Where do Buddhas come from? The East Mountain walks on the water. No plans and no regrets and no flaw, no fault, no mistake. Everything has brought you here. Here. And here doesn't belong to you or me or ducks on the water or hippopotamuses. Here is just much more vast and delightful. It's just funny. Yeah. Inside all the sounds, there's silence. Inside the conversations of the birds, the traffic sounds. inside your thoughts. Meditation. The far places that are here. Sabuchi Nenten is obsessed with hippos, and I was thinking of hippos because once somebody showed me, somebody on here from Nairobi, I think Marianne Burris, but somebody in Nairobi once showed me some photos of rock art in the Sahara that's got hippos. The Sahara, the great deserts of Africa are great galleries of ancient rock art from when there were lakes, and I thought how, and lakes, said 5,000 years there hasn't been that, but the lakes started to dry up and the hippos migrated down to Lake Victoria and things, and I'm thinking of our hippos are migrating up towards Seattle, I think. So it's like, and we're feeling more like Tucson or something. And just the profound nature of the change that is everything. All things fall under the law of change, as the Diamond Sutra said. And meanwhile, instead of hippos, I got obsessed with apricot blossoms. So I read a few apricot blossoms. Bear with me. Too far north to see canopus. You can just see canopus from just a certain time in spring, but not where I am. You got to be down Santa Cruz or somewhere. Too far north to see canopus, apricot blossoms. Raccoons at midnight pass under the apricot blossoms. After the long retreat, what to do? Blinking under the apricot blossoms. And I forgot my dream when I woke. Apricot blossoms. Feeling everything this morning. Not sure whether to be sad or happy. Apricot blossoms. And then finally, the madness of Sabuchi Nenten sort of got me into like madder kind of haiku. White bird, this is walking along the dune trails. White birds, white reflections in tide flats, egret presiding, tax season. A tribute to Nenten and his hippos. What else do I want to say here? The whole session the retreat was on silence, and silent silver winter moonlight snow. Silent silver winter moonlight snow is underneath everything. Everything depends on it. When you reach, it's in the reaching. When you search, it's in the dark. Everywhere you glimpse it, it's always been with you. When you sleep, it doesn't go away. So, I'll just read you. Susan Murphy, the Zen teacher in Australia, who's kind of a friend and was a student of mine. Not kind of, he was a friend, old friend. And I was talking to her last night. And she was telling me about this. I don't know if he's young or not, a New Zealand Zen teacher who's also a poet and wrote his own poems about some of the cases, some of the koans in the Book of Serenity. The koan about the emperor asked Bodhidharma, what is the first principle of a holy teaching? And Bodhidharma said, vast emptiness, nothing holy. And the emperor said, then who are you? And Bodhidharma said, I don't know. And here's the poem. This guy's name is Richard von Sturmer. I don't know him, but here's the poem he wrote. One giant silverfish eats through the ancestral library. Silverfish are, I don't know if you know what they are, but in Australia they eat books. They were my grandfather's enemy. Little things like this, and you open a book, and it's like got these big holes in it. They're kind of a bookworm, but they're actually not a worm. One giant silverfish eats through the ancestral library. His Royal Highness turns pages in his sleep, translucent pages, sparkling with dust motes, But in the end, he fails to find a single word. Kind of gorgeous. And then he wrote case 5 of Book of Serenity is, as Jun asked King Yuan, what's the great meaning of Buddhism, which is the same as the Emperor's question, what's the first principle? And everybody's always, like most Buddhist works you read, they'll tell you what the first principle is. That is different for different people. It's, concentration or mindfulness or loving kindness or something. And Zen says there ain't one. The first principle is here. Yeah. And anyway, so what's the first great meaning of Buddhism? And he says, how much is rice down the road? Yeah, what's the price of rice? And this teacher's poem says, washing his hands in the mouth of a famished lion, he forgot the bowl of fragrant rice his grandmother left for him on a wooden table one summer long ago. It's a rather wonderful idea of like the Zen poem. Okay, let me ask someone if they have anything to say. Alison, do you have anything to say? You were along that Miwok Trail with me, so.
I was. I wasn't thinking of taxes, though.
Neither was I. It just appeared as, that was my hippopotamus.
I was really struck with haikai is for freedom and how the poets would take multiple names. I think you said one of them took over 100 names, and how each one gave him another, like his identity kept being the telephone booth the walls kept falling down, with each different name, and how this feeling of nothing underneath us, walking East Mountain walks on the water, a feeling of nothing but fathomless liquid that just goes on forever, that squidgy feeling, and how the uncertainty in all those names, in a way, there's just like a tremendous amount of joy in even just imagining all those different names. And last week, my sister had hip replacement surgery, and so I sent her some flowers. And she lives in this tiny town on the coast in Oregon where they actually only have one florist. And so I was looking on their website to order, and they had about 50 different photographs of about 50 or 60 different bouquets. And I was carefully trying to choose one, but then I read, they told you all the flowers. This one has hydrangeas, this one has orchids, this one has roses. But then there's a little caveat at the bottom of underneath each description where it said, depending on season, we might replace all the flowers with other flowers that are just as beautiful. And then it said, we also might replace the vase that you see in the photograph with a different vase, but it's just as beautiful. And every single bouquet had that. So there's no way. It's like all the different haikai names. And so you just sort of close your eyes and like point at something. And so I thought blue. Okay, blue. I love these blue hydrangeas. At least maybe they'll get something, I don't know, in the blue range. And so my sister had the surgery, and then she sends me the photograph of the flowers. There was just like no relation to the one I picked. Absolutely none, like no correspondence at all, which was terrifically fun. At first I felt terribly sort of like disappointed because I didn't like the things that they chose. And then I thought, oh, that's sort of fun. But the most fun part was that they just sent this, you could write a little note that went with it. And so I sent, they give you a certain number of characters. So I carefully wrote out a shiki poem about flowers and getting well and his experience of this. And then I wrote a little note from me. But they, being this shonky little place in the middle of Newport, they had a tiny card, and they hand wrote the note, but they didn't know that one part was a poem, and I didn't know that Shiki's name was a name, and they also didn't distinguish my prose and my name, so it was all sort of jumbled and completely mangled. And my sister said in this sort of voice, she said, flowers, are just gorgeous. I just love them. Thank you so much. But did you know anything? Like, did you send a note? They sent this weird note with the flowers. And she shows me, she photographed the note. It's absolutely the best note ever with the flowers. I could not have made up a note that would be so full of good wishes for getting well. That's my report from East Mountain Walks on.
Thank you. Michelle, do you have anything to say?
Well, that was an awesome story. It's just like that thing where you think you're doing one thing and something else happens. It's like you're a participant in the world and you do something and it's driven by some desire that you have, and something happens. It's not necessarily what you intend. Anyway, that was just great. I think the only thing, let's see talking about the whole thing about names and different names and taking on different names and the imprisonment that comes from identifying with a name made me think of that exercise that we do from time to time at retreats or whenever you want, and where you might just look around your space or get up and walk outside, and when things appear, notice that we have a tendency to give it a name, which says we know what it is, and to instead just randomly name things. And, this is a frog. This is a pickle. Cat. And you just do that, and it sort of allows a freedom to everything that is us and everything we encounter when we don't imprison them in their names. It's kind of a fun exercise. So that just came to mind as you were talking. And I love that poem with the silverfish thing, and I thought that was amazing. So,
JJ, do you have anything to say?
Oh, gosh.
I should call you by another name. Joe.
Wee Jiao calling. Gosh, I really love the talk about inconceivability of our lives, and through farming and gardening, I'm very attached to how much water we're going to get any one year, and so I'm obsessively checking my app, to see what the long range forecast for rain is, and just to let you know, it's basically zero. And how I see that East Mountain Walks on Water is just an invitation to freedom in our lives, because it allows us to access that inconceivability, which is exciting. As can be drought ridden, but it's also really exciting. So my daughter actually has kind of gotten into, after a year sped up in the mountains of Northern California, gotten into forestry management and firefighting. And her friend sent me an invitation to a class to learn how to become a wildland firefighter. So I'm taking the class, and I'm learning to become a wildland firefighter. And it's completely inconceivable where that will go. But I think it's appropriate.
So, just feeling it a bit here. The that exercise Michelle talked about, that well, the first time we did that, actually, Michelle and I were running a retreat about 20 years, a long ago, and I'd never done this before, but I had people run around and shout the names of, they'd see a desk and they'd shout, whatever it is, horse or whatever came to them. And Michelle and I were running this process. It's been very funny. And I thought, I don't know, this is going to work. Actually, people blew their minds. And some guy I'd never met before, he'd never come to another retreat, he came running into me and said, I've had awakening. I am enlightened. I must go home and tell my wife, and took off, and we never saw him again. ever. So I thought it was kind of a powerful effect. Taking a different name. It's interesting to think what different names we might take. Chris Gaffney's on here, I think. When he's he's kind of more or less permanent head of practice, and he's Fireboy or Dr. Crane or things like that when he's head of practice. So it's in Zen as well as Haiku too. Yeah. Let's sit a little more, just to feel it, just to feel the silence through the means of silence. There's also silence inside words and sounds. I suppose if somebody asked us to describe meditation, whenever anybody asks me to describe meditation, which occasionally interviewers do, I suppose we can just enter the inconceivable. The East Mountain walks on the water. I just found Chris Gaffney. And do you have any thoughts about pen names in Zen, Chris?
Pen names.
Well, I know pen names, Zen names.
Yeah. It's like you can inhabit the name a bit. The name can inhabit you. So, like, I loved how he said, I'm a man who is a hippo. He didn't say I'm a hippo. He said, I'm a man who is a hippo. So I'm a man who is a crane and a man who is a fox and a fireboy and a crow. And yeah, it's loosens things up a bit. I also love here has always been here. That's great. I'm going to keep that one. Here has always been here. Seems to be the case.
To support these episodes or learn more about upcoming programs and retreats at Pacific Zen Institute, visit us at pacificzen.org. You'll find details on John Tarrant's Sunday talks, our Open Temple morning meditation, and our Zen Luminary series featuring intimate conversations with scholars, poets, and teachers of koan Zen. Thanks for listening.